has an interesting past that I'm going to let him talk to you about. But I think that he will give you a lot of inspiration and hope, and also a lot of understanding of yourself and other people. So let's give him a warm welcome.
I'm going to turn this on over here, so this is ready to go. There's a passcode.
3175.
All right, nobody remember that.
It's okay. We'll change it. Yes.
Yep, that's good. Okay. All right. All right. So if we can swap to the presentation, ready to go. There you go. Great. View, and then there it is. Full screen mode. Towards the bottom. A little bit further down.
There we go. A little hard to see.
All right. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about behavior patterns. Really, we're talking about personality psychology, but it's how we can use it for business success and workplace happiness, and really make your life better. And what it comes down to is, it turns out everyone behaves in patterns. So we're going to talk about that and how it makes a difference. Do it. I wonder if we can turn off the little extra box up there. There's a way. The little X. Perfect. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little about the background, my background, my company, the science of what we're talking about, how it makes an impact in your life, specifically how it affects communication, deadlines, how it affects stress and conflict, and furthermore, how you can apply it. And then we're going to talk a little bit how this affects your specific personal strengths and weaknesses, and the strengths and weaknesses of the people you work with, and how that can be, use your strengths to compensate for your weaknesses, and how your weaknesses can be mitigated. And we use that in a couple of ways. We talked about that is specifically go-to behaviors, and then the kinds of things we like to think of as your mental superpower. All right, so go ahead. So, who am I? So my name is Sterling Bates. When I went to college, I actually worked on a math degree. So it may be a little surprising to see me up here talking about psychology. But I spent 10 years in the corporate world, in corporate IT, 5 of that doing business intelligence for Disney. So I was the product manager for the company, which means I was responsible for the strategy of how we looked at business intelligence and how we implemented it across the entire company. How many people know what I mean by business intelligence? A few, maybe. Besides thinking it's an oxymoron, it's really the science and study of how you get the right information to the right people at the right time. So if an executive dashboard or any kind of reporting systems all fit in the realm of business intelligence. And I began to realize that the reason most projects failed had a little bit less to do with technology and a lot more to do with people. So I started studying people. For my own development, as well as the success of my business and the things we were doing, I said, I need to study people. So I became fully qualified for all level B psychological exams during that process, which means, in case anybody's curious, I am not qualified to send anyone to the loony bin, nor can I prescribe drugs. Sorry. If anybody needs to go now, but no. But what I did do is, as I got it became a real passion of mine to understand this and how it applies. I spent time in organizational development with Disney, became a member of SHRM, Society of HR Managers. Again, notice I was in IT before. And at the time I began to realize that IT was no longer the career path for me, and that is when marketing created a role for me. So I spent 3 years in Disney marketing, where it was about integrating technology, psychology, business, statistics. How do you bring those all together so that you can make a difference? And so about that time, Disney started to go through one of its downsizing. How many people have been through something like that a little bit? Right? So I was offered a package, and I was, while I enjoyed my time in corporate America, I wanted to do more with my life. And so I took a package and I left. And now it's been 4 years full-time as an entrepreneur. So I've already been through one business where I sold out finally to my partner so I could create the business of my dreams. And I'm happily up here talking to you in that position as someone who's now running the business of their dreams. So that is the company Step Research, which its sole purpose is to find innovative ways to integrate psychology, technology, statistics, and business. Do you see how this began to lead from my earlier life? Right? It's all these things that I love are finally all together in one place. Now, as part of that journey, I am on the International Association of Psychological Type, which, if anybody are familiar with any books around the world of Myers-Briggs Type Indicators, psychological type, Jungian psychology, most of those authors I know personally and talk with on a semi-regular basis. So this is something I spend a fair amount of time with, and I am on the executive board of directors. So this is on a quick side note. If anybody's curious, their conference for every 2 years is going to be this summer in Miami. And so people can go sign up for that and go to that conference in Miami. So that's a week-long conference, and they use most of it's over the weekend, but some of it they have a number of sessions beforehand. So if anybody actually wants to pursue that, that is something that's going on there. That's aptinternational.org. That's not up there, but that's their website for the association. So, if you would. So what Step Research, what does my company do? Just a tiny bit of background to help you understand the information I'm going to give you after that. So what Step Research does is we do psychology technology. Next slide. And I do actually work with the NFL and the Major League Baseball on how to profile somebody before you're going to spend millions of dollars on a 20-something. You kind of want to know what you're going to get. So we help them figure that out. Next slide. We do behavior patterns. We do dashboards for the coaches, for the NFL coaches and the Major League Baseball. Help them understand their players, how to work with them better, how to motivate them, how to keep them engaged. Next slide. Performance profiling. How many people watch NFL? All right, like the NFL. This is actually Andrew Luck's performance profile. And anybody knows he did really well this past year? The blue line is him compared to other standards and averages. Next one. We also did predictive analytics on how to match people to who they most like. Because it turns out that how many people here are psychological experts? So if I gave you a report with 100 pages about some potential employee, how useful is that to you? Right? So we figured out that for most of the coaches, the most effective way to present information to them was instead to say, hey, you know the players you've coached before? He's most like this other player. And that immediately told that coach a lot more than information than I could ever give them, whether they even wanted that player or not, right? Whether that was a great player, how to motivate them, how to work with them. So we found ways to translate information more quickly. Next. We used to do a lot of work with customer service, marketing, and sales. It turns out that not everybody wants to be treated the same. I know, shocking. So we help companies understand how to change how they present to their customers the way their customer wants to be treated. And treat their customers differently than their other customers. Go ahead. And something hopefully many of you had a chance to go do. How many had a chance to go take the quiz at GetSight? Most of you? Great. That is in beta. Previously, up to now, our businesses, it's been exclusively business to business. So we're starting to explore the world of business to consumer, going direct to consumers. So if you go to GetSight, we have free. The intention is to do a freemium model, which is we provide a lot of services for free, and you love them so much that you're willing to give us money later. But it allows me to also provide value back to people. Right? One of the reasons I'm here is because I've been through the entrepreneurship journey, and I love supporting entrepreneurship. That's actually how I got connected with Jan, was through other people I work with to support entrepreneurship. So it's about giving back as well. So this is an opportunity for me to give something back that I love, that I enjoy, that I think can make a difference in people's lives. One of the things we did is we pioneered. How many people have taken the official MBTI before? The official one. Okay. It's about 84 questions. We boil it down to about 20, and we're nearly as accurate. So we've pioneered some new approaches on how to do assessments, ways to go do that. And so this is the free report. Can you go ahead, next one? Yeah. So this is like the free report. Hopefully some of you have this with you already. If not, it's online, again, for free. We also have, next slide. We've also boiled it down to specific presentations, taking all the information we're able to collect from a number of different psychological systems and convey them to you in a way that's useful. One for at work, and another one for, next slide, a personal relationship between you and another person. Specifically how you and that other person work together. And instead of paying $10, $20, $30, $40 for books that you have to buy many of them, we've boiled them down to, at this point, while we're in beta, $5 a piece. So we're trying really hard to make this as affordable for everybody as we can. All right. And finally, out of that is a way to track all of your different systems, because there are multiple ways to understand behavior patterns. Yes?
Does the site have a PayPal button?
It doesn't.
Oh, no.
By the way, I use Stripe. If anybody is not familiar with them, Stripe is an amazing application for using credit card processing online on a website. brilliant. It's designed for entrepreneurs.
STRIKE?
Stripe, as in like a stripe, like a stripe on a zebra. Stripe.com.
I'm just worried about, safety.
Safety, yes. That's what I said. So check out Stripe. There's other things you have to go do like SSL, but there's lots of fun things I can talk about at some point if you have questions afterwards. But it's about helping people track their profiles. All right, okay, that's fun, right? But where's the science? I came at this from the math perspective, and so I wanted to really understand what we were getting into. So if you would. And there are a lot of ways to look at behavior patterns. Some of you mentioned, how many have at least heard of the Myers-Briggs type indicator before? Right, most people. It's used by pretty much every Fortune 500 company in some way. How many people have heard of Carl Jung, or Jungian type? All right, Jungian psychology, great. Cognitive functions. How many people have taken the DISC or are familiar with it? A few people. It's quite common in sales environments as well as social styles. How many people have heard of that? Less? Maybe? Oh, a couple. All right. How many people have heard of the 5-factor model? That's really popular in standard psychology. Right? So there's lots and lots of different ways to go look at the patterns in which we behave. So I'm going to talk through a couple of them, but the most important thing I want you to hopefully take away from this speech today is that people behave differently. You are different from the other people around you, and understanding that can make a huge difference in your business, your personal life, and in your relationships with others, coworkers, friends, and family. So when I say psychological type, what it is I'm talking about is everything we're going to talk about from now on is really about preferences. So how many people are left-handed? How many people are right-handed? Okay, so if you have to write your name with your offhand, you have to sign your name, what happens?
Right backwards.
Backwards? What else? You have to think about it. Is it slower?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does it look as good?
No.
No? Okay. Now, but what happens if you have to carry a heavy box? Do you use both hands?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So everything we're talking about here is psychological preferences. Not whether someone can or cannot do something, but whether you have to do it, whether it's going to be stressful, take more time, require more energy, or if it's going to feel easy and natural. So that's what we're discussing here, are these kind of like handed preferences. And that's the way to think about what we're doing. All right, if you would. So this is not your intelligence, not whether you're mentally ill. Please note, again, I'm not qualified to do that. This is not about what your specific skills are. Each of you had your own careers, your own experiences. It's not about if you're happy or not right now. It's not about trauma. It's not about if you're normal or not. Instead, it's about, if you would, about different kinds of normal. That's what we're talking about. These are just like left or right-handed. Neither is bad. They're just different. Different ways in which you gather energy, different things that cause you stress, and that these differences are good. And it's a way to describe your mental strength, your mental blind stats, and to hopefully describe an ideal work environment. One in which, as entrepreneurs, you're in a unique position to create compared to the corporate world. So the theory says that you have one true personality type from birth. You're born with it. And how many are parents with more than one kid? Quick test. All right. So most of the people that I say this to believe me right away when I say that. Kids have a personality type that's kind of their own right from birth. Right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? And so this is, as you grow older, as you go through your life, you get refined, you become more accurate in your results. Because I'm going to tell you a secret right now that not many people will tell you. All the tests you've ever taken about psychological type are wrong. Every one of them. Because here's the trick. What's on the inside is not the same thing that's on the outside. And so those tests all ask you questions about things you do in the outside world. But why you do it is on the inside. And so they're trying to get there. But it means at the end of the day, the only person who is truly accurate about your personality type is you. The tests exist purely to take you down the path to help you get closer, to give you more understanding. But the real answer for your personality type is you. So whatever my test gave you, right, it's your job to tell me I did it wrong. I want you to. Right? Now, of course, we work really hard to make it as accurate as possible, but at the end of the day, you are the final answer. All right? And that's because, again, you have your personality type, but how you're raised, the school you go with, the friends you have, your experiences, the culture you grew up in, right? And the work you do, and all these other unknown factors provide the specific behavior that people see on the outside world. But underneath that is your personality type. In the same way that if you're left or right-handed and you break your arm, do you get pretty good at using your offhand for the next several months? Yeah, right? In the same way that if you go to a workplace where it's not your strength, where it causes you a lot of stress, but you have to do it, you might get pretty good at it. Does that mean it's necessarily going to be your favorite thing to do? No, right? Same thing. All right? If you would. All right, so Dario Nardi of UCLA decided to try to figure out if there was more to this personality type than just observed behaviors, and so he put it together with an EEG brain scan. Actually put the scanners on people's heads and then went through a whole bunch of different efforts and looked at that as it correlates with personality type. If you would. Quick, everybody's familiar with left and right, sides of the brain, different areas of specialty. If you would, another slide. This goes into more detail. There will not be a test on this. Don't panic. So this is from the top of the head. So that little triangle at the front is the nose. Here's the right ear. Here's the left ear. So again, this is where you look at words. This is where you look at tone and voice of effect. Quick side note, this is for right-handed people only. You left-handed people mess this all up. So this is where your brain does those kinds of operations, right? So this is the top level, not the deep underlying, but this is the top level where your brain does this. So I'm now going to show you two different personality types doing the exact same thing, if you would. So this is the type code ESTJ. We'll talk about what that means in a little bit more detail. And what this person is doing is they're doing a storybook math problem. Are you familiar with the kind? Two trains are headed to Chicago. One from the west, going 50 miles an hour. The other person is on the train coming from the east, going 100 miles an hour. We've all done a problem like that. That's what this brain is doing. So they look at the words of the problem. They recall the factual details. They construct a visual image, linear deductive reasoning, explain and decide. Boom, boom, boom. Got the answer. I'm done. I'm on to the next question. That's what this brain is doing. Very good at it. Now, let me show you an opposite personality type and how their brain approaches the exact same problem. So if you would, this is the INFP. So this brain is very focused on humans and relationships. So therefore, when looking at the storybook problem, their math problem is starting to do this. Place personal value. Why are they going to Chicago? That's what their brain's asking. Right? Is this a romantic relationship? Are they going there for a romantic tryst? Is this work? Why are they there? And furthermore, future projection. What are they going to do when they get there? I know a lot of things in Chicago. What's going on there? And so they're looking at the, visualizing and mirroring the other's behavior, thinking about what it would be like to be on a train. Right? Empathy. Right? That's what their brain does. So now they eventually get to that explain and decide, and they get there and they get that answer. But their brain is not naturally focused on just minimizing the work done to get that problem. Their brain is asking other questions about that problem. All right, so if you would. So again, brains work differently. People are wired differently. Both can get to the right answer, but how they get there and the approach they use to understand that is going to be very different. All right? So we like to call this, we'll talk about this a little bit more, we like to call this hyperspeed. Right? The superpower of their brain is actually super efficient about understanding and solving problems, moving right on. And we'll talk this one, selfless courage. Right? This brain is actually very focused on values. Right? What's important in life, the ethically right and wrong. So, right, if you would. So again, by show of hands, how many people have taken the MBTI before? Great. All right. So what I want to do is, even if you've done that before, or if you took the test before, I want you to take on a piece of paper, and I want you to draw out these little lines. The letters on either side. You don't have to draw the box around the letters, right? But just E or I with a line between it, S and N with a line between it, T and F with a line between it, and J and P. People, go to the next slide. The MBTI uses fun names for these. They don't mean the same thing we use in common speech, so I'll explain them. So by the way, this is where the letters come from. E is for extroversion, I is for introversion, S is for sensing, N is for intuition, the I was already taken. T is for thinking, F is for feeling, J is for judgment, and P is for perception. And I'm going to define these words. Don't assume these words mean what you think they mean just yet. If you would, next slide. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to use this, and during the part of the speech today, it's your responsibility to mark where you feel you are on each of these scales. This is like think of each one of these as being a little bit like left or right-handed. Right? Yes, you do both, but the question is, which one is more naturally you? So that's the question I'm asking you. So if you would, next slide. This is actually me. These are my natural preferences. You know? So the only rule is that you can get close to the line in the middle, you just can't be on it exactly. For the purposes of today, none of us are ambidextrous. We have a preference. All right, so here is extroversion or introversion is really more about where you gather your energy. It's not about social skills. So this is instead, people with an extroversion preference love interaction. They get a lot of energy from interacting with other people. So they get much of their energy from that meeting new people, going out, talk to people. Can you tell I'm an extrovert? Right? Yes. Okay, so people with an introversion preference need more of an even interaction. They get a lot of energy from that quiet time, that time they spend by themselves or with a close loved one. Right? And this is not about social skills. My mother was a professional speaker, and she has introversion preferences. It's just that when she's done giving her speech, she's tired, and when I'm done giving my speech, I plan to go out and hang out with friends for lunch, right? Just different levels of way we gather energy. All right? The next one, sensing or intuition. This is about how you prefer to gather information. So, people with a sensing preference prefer to gather information from what's there, what they can really gather through their five senses, right? Hey, it's real, I've seen it, I've heard it, I know it's there, and then focus on what's now and what the traditions look like, what's happened in the past. People with an intuition preference are often very focused on how things connect together, the patterns. It's not what it is, it's what it's linked to that's important. So, and often very focused for that purpose on the future, gathering information from what might be. All right, next. So, thinking or feeling is not directly about emotions. So, these are referred to as both rational ways of making a decision. In the same way we were looking at before with the problem solving, one approach says, I'm going to look at the objective and give the most weight to numbers, the metrics, what we measure. The feeling perspective, it says, I give more weight to the subjective criteria, right, with the heart. Who's there? Who's going to be impacted? And if you remember looking at those two different brain scans, that was a great example of the two different sides of that fence. One was focused on the numbers and the measurements, and the other was more focused on the people and the values. All right, next one. And the last one is how you prefer to create structure in your life. So the judgment preference says you like to have things planned and decided. You like the schedule. You like to know it's there. You like to put that together. The perceiving approach is a prefer to create structure on being flexible and being open in your life. Allowing yourself to wait and see, gather information. The word perception actually comes from this. I like to think of it as wait and see, gather more information. Right? Why would I make a decision early when I can wait longer? So go ahead, next slide. So go ahead and mark where you think you are. Right? And by the way, feel free to change it later. Right? Because as you understand more about what we're talking about, as you go through your life, you understand yourself more, the expectation is that you understand your true type better. So, using time. All right, so, and by the way, if you have the printout, there's a section there called the personality type code, about halfway down the paper, which has what the test thought you were. Again, I expect you to tell me I'm wrong. Please do. All right, if you would. So, great. Who cares? Right? All right, so fine, you've got some fancy letters, but now what? You want to do something with your life. So, what does this mean for you? You've got these fancy letters, but how does that make a difference in your life? So if you would. So first let's talk about, we're going to talk about communication, how it affects deadline and schedules, and how it's, for you, as well as the people you interact with, changing conflict. So, and by teamwork, I mean coworkers. I also mean customers, you partner with them, and I also mean families and friends. So it's not just you, but anybody you interact with as well. All right? So, communication. So, let's talk about that. Next slide. So, people with a preference for extroversion, like myself, talk while thinking. People with an introversion preference often talk after thinking. And furthermore, this actually, from a brain scan perspective, describes where some people often do their best thinking. People with an extroversion preference often do their best thinking while talking, and people with an introversion preference often do their best thinking when they're by themselves. So if you're going to do a brainstorming meeting, and you have an extroversion preference, and you walk over to your business partner, and you say, hey, I have an idea, let's talk about it. Is that person with introversion able to do their best thinking in that meeting?
No.
Nope. Now, they're going to do their best, and they might have some really good thoughts, but you might be much better served by sending them an email and saying, hey, tomorrow, could we discuss this, so they have a chance to do their best thinking for that meeting? And the flip side, if you ask someone to go off by themselves and come up with a bunch of ideas, who has an extroversion preference, are they going to give their best thinking to that process?
No.
Nope. Right? So again, this is where your brain often does its best thinking, if you would. So this has a little corollary, and that is, if you don't know it from an extrovert, you haven't been listening. And if you don't know it from an introvert, you haven't asked. All right? So when it comes to communication, people with a perceiving preference naturally talk and hear options. People with a judging preference naturally talk and hear decisions. How many people think that they might have a perceiving preference? Right? All right. How many people think you might have a judging preference? Great. So now let me give you a good example. Let's say you have a couple, a relationship, and the person with the perceiving preference on Friday night goes, hey, the new Avengers movie is out. It's playing tomorrow at the local theater at 5. Isn't that cool? What are they talking as a perceiving preference? The option. What did their spouse, the person with the judging preference, just hear?
We have to.
Right. So the spouse, come the next day, about 3:30, is walking out dressed, ready to go, going, what are you doing? Right? Meanwhile, the person with perceiving preference is watching the game or playing a football or a sports game or whatever it is, and going, what are you talking about? Right? Because they were talking an option. And this also plays out when it comes to something like, say, as simple as website design or a business meeting. If somebody walks up and goes, hey, you know what? I was thinking we could do these things next week for the business. I think there's some stuff we really need to do for our customers. If we really want to do well with them, we need to go do these kinds of things. If that person is a perceiving boss, what were they talking? Options. If they were talking if they were having a boss with a judging preference, what were they talking? Yeah. That better be done next week. Right? Now, of course, you can often get around this. Sometimes the judging preference might say, or perceived preference might say, hey, I'm talking options. Or it might be more clear, but sometimes it's not. All right, next. So this does have a corollary. People with a judging preference do tend to have definite opinions. They know what they do want. And people with a perceiving preference know what they don't want, and often will answer a question with another question. I'll give you the most classic example is, where do you want to go for lunch? I don't know. Where do you want to go? What's the person doing at that point? Gathering more information, right? Why would I make a decision until I've had a chance to gather more information? All right. So, when it comes to communication, people with a perceiving or thinking preference, how many people think that they have a thinking preference? All right. How many people a feeling preference? Good. Hey, good. Isn't that a struggle sometimes? So people with a thinking preference tend to want to talk about the problem first. That's how they build credibility in understanding the situation. People with a feeling preference want to talk about the people first. That's how you build trust. What's good? If you would. So how many people are familiar with we're going to talk about the pros and the cons. You've heard that phrase before? Pros and cons?
Yes.
Especially entrepreneurship, right? Pros and cons. So this often often describes which part of that pros and cons side of the fence your brain naturally likes more. So, if you would, next slide. People with a thinking preference their brain tends to naturally think through the cons first, starting with the problem identification, problem solving, constructive criticism. As a matter of fact, this can result in a process, if you would, next slide. Well, actually, we'll talk about that briefly. That the people with feeling preference, their brain tends to naturally start with the pros first. It's easier. Starting with the, well, how can we collaborate together? What's great about this? And support and encourage. And how these fit together. Now, if you would to the next slide. Now, it turns out that your brain does both. It's really a question of which one your brain starts with and then gets to the other. So what does this look like? You've just brought a new project idea to somebody who's maybe your thinking business partner. And you say, I have a great idea. Here's how we're going to make some money. And you lay out your idea, and then they spend the next 30 minutes telling you everything that's wrong with the idea. It's not going to work because of this is going to be fixed, this is not going to work, that's going to problem, and this is it. And at the end you're like, well fine, you hate it. And they're like, oh no, I love it. I totally think we should do it. And you're like, but you just spent 30 minutes ripping it apart. That's because, if you went right, they're working on constructive criticism, right? Identification. Work through what needs to be fixed first, right? And then, next slide, they get to this portion of the process, right? That's naturally how their brain works, right? And the flip side is true for building trust. If you were to walk up and do that, and you have a feeling preference, how much trust have they just built with you on your project? Zip, right? If you had started instead with the, I know you have a feeling preference, so I'm going to start with, hey, I think this is a great idea, and I think it's fantastic, and then now let me talk about some of the things I think we need to go to implement it. Now you've got trust. And so the flip side is also true. If you walk up with a project idea, and you have a thinking preference, you want the hard problems, right? You're presenting the problem, this project to them because you want them to tell you what's wrong with it. And they start going, oh, I think it's the best idea ever, I think it's great, I think it's... Right? You've lost credibility, right, in your ability to communicate what you think is important about that project then. Because they needed to hear the problems first. So this is where your brain builds that credibility and trust, is hearing the other one first. Actually, this becomes so... I think is it next one after this? Keep going one more. Yeah. Okay. So this really is the people that think preference want to hear the negative first. And if you start with the positive first, their brain goes, where's the catch, right? You're being too effusive with your praise. What's going on? And people with the feeling preference want to hear the positive first, right? Otherwise, they're going, it's not all bad. I don't know that I really believe you, right? You're not trustworthy. And as a matter of fact, in our research into customer service and sales, this is so powerful that if you are trying to sell someone to something, right, you're trying to pitch your business's product, and the person you're pitching to has a thinking preference, you're better off starting with what's wrong with your product. Why they shouldn't buy your product. Why? Because if they've been willing to just spend 10 minutes telling you when not to use your product. Like, hey, you know what? Our product is really not great for gigantic businesses, right? It's really optimized for small businesses. It's not a great fit if you're huge. It's also primarily most valuable if it's not optimized for Macs. It's only going to work on PCs, right? You're telling them the problems. So now guess what happens when you tell them about the good parts about your product?
They'll believe you.
Is it believable? Yes. Yeah. And furthermore, their brain actually does problem solving. So when you tell them it doesn't work in a big business, what's their brain doing? I'm going, sorting the problem and going, well, actually, we have it's okay, we're actually a medium business, that's perfect. But that's fine, we've only got the one guy with a Mac. We don't care about what he said things anyway, right? Right? So they're already solving the problems. You gave them the problem, and now they're solving it. And if you started with what was great, what are they doing all the time you're talking about what's so amazing about your product?
Thinking about what's bad.
Tell me what's wrong, right? And the flip side works for feeling. If you're pitching to an F, then you want to start with what's right about your product, right? More specifically, what's right for people. There's actually, we have a famous story of a lady that had really strong feeling preferences, and she'd gone into a car sales lot because she had some time to kill. and the person was so nice to her and spent so much time talking to her about her family, she felt she had to buy a car. Right? Because part of the theory goes, if you have a strong feeling preference, is if you don't understand me and the people in my company, how in the world could you offer me a product? Right? If you don't know who I am and what I'm about, how could you even suggest your product to me if you don't know who I am? Right, that's the feeling perspective, right? You got to focus on the people. Start with what's right about your product, what's right for the people. All right? Now, when it comes to communication and remembering specific conversations, that's where it gets fun. People with an intuition preference. How many people think they have an intuition preference? All right? How many people can give a sensing preference? Okay? So people with an intuition preference tend to remember the abstract idea or the impression of the conversation or decision. People with a sensing preference tend to remember the small details. I'll give you an example. You're talking to your website developer, and you say, hey, look, we need to do something to really jazz up the website, make it flashy. We need to really capture their attention, some strong contrast. I'm thinking like maybe red. We've got to really make it stand out. If your developer has a sensing preference, what did they hear? Red or flashy. It's going to be a flashing red GIF, right? That's what they heard. That's what you said. Now, if they have an intuition preference, what did they hear? Exciting. Capture their attention, right? Powerful. Will it be red? Maybe. Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But that wasn't the important part of what you said. Now, think about it if it was the person talking and they had a sensing preference. What was most important to them when they just told you? That it be red. Right? And if there was an intuition preference, did they care? And they were telling you this? Did they care if it's red or not? Probably not. Right? Or not as much. Right? And so this is a great example of how your brain approaches conversations and what you describe to people. Good? So we like to, this is called a corollary. We call it the concrete versus abstract corollary. So therefore, a good example is to describe something. The sensing preference says time is minutes and hours. It is minutes and hours. Why are we even having this discussion? However, the intuition preference says time is like an arrow. It flies when you're having fun. Note the intuition preference loves metaphors and similes. It connects things to what other things are. However, the sensing preference tends to really dislike metaphors and similes. It is not like an arrow. Are you kidding me? Right? Where does that idea come from? All right, so if you wait. So when it comes to communication, people with a sensing preference need the details. If you're communicating to them, it's a pitch, it's a business partner, it's a relationship, they need the details. The intuition preference really needs that why, that big picture. Next slide. So you've heard the forest for the trees. How many of you have heard that phrase before? Right? This is what your brain starts with. And again, like left or right-handed, your brain wants to start with one or the other first. The person with the intuition preference really needs to have that forest, that big picture. And here's the reason why. Because next slide, as lots of details come in, then the person with an intuition preference needs that big picture, do the next slide, to hang them someplace. Right? Otherwise, it's a bunch of random details. Whoa, you're moving too much, too fast. Right? I need some place to stick them. I need to see where they fit. They're building that pattern in their head. That's most important to them. The flip side is the sensing preference needs all those details so they can confirm what that, if you would next slide, big picture is supposed to look like. Right? The big picture doesn't even make sense without enough details to understand how it fits together. They've got to see all those details. Now, next slide. The reality is, your brain does both, right? It takes the big picture and the details. It's just like left or right, which one is easier? So if you're going to present something about your project to someone else, knowing which one you're presenting to might be really important. All right, next one. Now, deadlines and schedules. This is really big in business, especially in entrepreneurship. Right? Always you've got these deadline schedules, things are changing quickly. So if you would, one of the things that's really important is that for a person with introversion preference, no private time is going to leave the person tired. So if you have meetings all day, plan some private time. Put it in your schedule. Make sure you've got it. Because otherwise, you're not going to have energy to deal with the rest of your day. People with an extroversion preference need that talk time to build their energy. If you're spending all day working on your plan or working on your business plan or working on your, sitting there quietly trying to go through all that process, and it's lunchtime, plan time to go spend with other people so that you can have your energy back. This was actually one of my big concerns when I became an entrepreneur myself and started working from home. I have naturally an extroverted preference. I was used to being in cubicle land, right, where there's always people to talk to. Walk by, hey, I have an idea, let's talk. I was used to that, and I was really worried that I wasn't going to have enough energy, enough time talking with others. And I found ways to go do that. I actually use Google Hangout and Skype to do a lot of video conferences. I do lunches a lot of times. I plan lunches with a lot of people so that I get out of my home, and I go interact with people, and I build up my energy so I can go back to my desk and work some more. It's necessary for me to keep going. Even if I'm doing stuff where it requires me to be by myself, I need to plan that talk time. Right? Now, yes?
I had a question. Can you go back to that other slide? I'm in the extrovert there, and where, like you're talking now, I kind of, I feel like I have to say something. But I just wonder, like in this room, there's a lot of people like that. I don't get energized unless I somehow
interact.
Yeah. Right. Are there others?
Yeah.
Is there? There's something that isn't, I guess. That's what I'm surprised. Is there people that don't need that? And you could just sit there?
They're not even going to raise their hands.
Okay, I just was interested in knowing that.
Yeah, and that's a great example of why I think this is so important, right? Is there's those things that we know about ourselves. And it's easy to go, well, clearly that's what works for me, right? So that must be what I would want to do for other people. Like the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But after looking at this for long, it becomes very clear that that may not actually be what they want at all. Right? So we often refer to that as the platinum rule, right? Which is to do unto others as they want to have done unto them. Right? Do what they want, not necessarily what you want. Right? And that's a great point. Is that there is, I'm the same way, right? I feel that I connect, like if there's a teacher, I'm one of those people that actually sit towards the front because I want to talk back to the teacher. I want that close. I want to be able to feel like interacting. Yes?
So, I just want to share with the group, I'm an I, and I'm proud to stand up and say that I'm an I. But I love coming to Biz Lunch. I love interacting with all of our customers and hearing your business ideas and talking with you. But like an I, afterwards, same as your mom, it's like, whew. It's like, wow, I can't wait to get back to my desk and kind of decompress from it all. And I think that's a lot of what you're trying to explain.
Yes.
It's a preference. It's not that I prefer sitting in a cubicle and just doing my little work. I actually prefer coming to Biz Lunch and seeing everybody. But it leaves me tired. Like you, I want to go, or unlike you, I want to go back to my desk and be compressed afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't want to go out with friends anymore.
Right. And that's exactly. This is not about skill, right? It's about energy and stress and the way your brain clicks, right? All right. So, great comment. People with a judging preference get energy from planning. Making the plan gives them energy. People with a perceiving preference get energy from deadlines. So what does this look like, if you would? So we're all working towards a deadline. It's 4 months away. And people with a judging preference look out towards that deadline and they go, great. All right, next slide. All right, we're going to get this done by here, the 1 month mark, the 2 month mark, the 3 month mark, so we're going to get the project done by the deadline. We're going to be great. The person with the perceiving preference is gathering information during this time. Wandering back and forth, talking to these other people, doing these other things, maybe thinking about it. Well, I'm kind of thinking, maybe doing some online research. And as he closes the deadline, hurry, get a bunch of energy, and done. Woo! All good. Barely into the wire. Now, here's what's funny. The part is people with perceiving preference get energy from the deadline. They're often at their most creative as that deadline approaches. They're literally more creative. Their brain has got more juice kicking away.
More energy.
More energy, right? Get it done. So guess what happens when you give them a project and there's no deadline?
Dead.
So as much as your partner, as a person with a naturally has a perceiving preference, right? All those deadlines get in the way of me thinking about my life and doing my stuff. However, without that deadline, it's hard. It's really hard. So if you're an entrepreneur with a perceiving preference, give yourself deadlines. Find ways to have other people hold you to deadlines, because otherwise, you need those deadlines to build that burst of energy.
Are you sure P doesn't stand for procrastinate?
It may look like that. I should point out, perceiving people do not have a lock on procrastination. All right. For example, how many people think they have a judging preference? Right? Have you ever procrastinated something? Oh yeah. Right. So it may look like that, but they don't have a lock on it. No one's got ownership of that one.
I'm really interested, looking at the workplace, I'm really interested in how teams work together, because you want to be able to use the differences in people to get the best dynamic.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at what you just described on P, and I'm a P to the 20th power, I think. I had an assistant one time who was very, very organized, J-type person. And she said to me, "You drive me crazy because you live on the edge." You live on the edge, because I was always over here.
Right.
And at the end, I mean, we were running at the end, and she wanted to run like 3 months before,
right,
and have all the stuff together. So you can, if you understand the dynamic, you can come up with a better end product.
Yes.
If you don't, you can really have trouble.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe you can actually start out at some point as a P and become a J.
Yeah.
But in college, I would wait till the night before the exam, and then get up at 4 a.m. and read the book, cover to cover, and take the exam. Now, I plan vacations 2 years in advance.
So again, these are preferences. If you have important things in your life, like your business, right, you might use both, right? You'll schedule a bunch of stuff, and you'll get energy because that's what you have to do to get it done. So let me give you two possible scenarios. The first scenario is, at the 2-month mark, you're going to learn from a major vendor that they're no longer able to supply you. So if you have a judging preference, and you've been working with this vendor, and you're now at the 2-month mark, what happens to all that work that you did? Wasted, right? Right? And now, if you're over here, and at the 2-month mark, the vendor calls you up and says, "I can't work with you anymore," how much work was wasted?
None.
Why? That's just more information. I was researching a whole bunch of vendors. All right, you're not going to work. No big deal. I got 3 more I'm thinking about. Right?
I think so, 1/2 dozen.
No big deal. Now, let's talk about the flip side. Let's say there's a problem in the design, and you can't figure out the problem until it's half built. So if you get it half built here, how much time do you have to figure out to fix the design and make it work again?
A lot of time.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
If you can't figure out until here there's a problem in the design, how much time do you have to fix it? Not very much. Right? That might be the 10 o'clock trying to find a Home Depot open, right? Or whatever, right? The last second trying to go work that go, oops, right? And so sometimes that may not quite make it. So neither of these is right or wrong. They're just different ways of approaching the problems, right? Different ways of gathering energy. And invariably, it turns out as you go through life, you learn some skill for both. Sometimes things happen and you have to learn to adapt to changing deadlines. And if you want to get your business out the door, you probably have to spend some time doing some planning, even if that's not your strength. All right. So when it comes to knowing which plan or option to go with, that's where that thinking or feeling preference begins to come in. The people with the thinking preference tend to decide based upon measurable goals or criteria. We're going to decide which plan based upon how it's going to save more money. Which plan is going to earn us higher customer conversion. The person with a feeling preference tends to decide based upon subjective goals and criteria. How is this going to make our customers feel? Which one is going to keep our employees really engaged? Right? Nope, there aren't any hard numbers to do with that. So therefore, and so that's where those criteria come in. Now, I have a question. if you're buying a house, are you going to take both sets of criteria into account?
Yes.
Yeah. You're going to look at not only the square footage and the loan and the numbers and the drive time, but you're also going to be asking yourself, is our family going to be comfortable here? You know, is this the drive going to be such that our family's going to be able to handle it? So you're going to use both, but your brain naturally gives one set of these criteria a little bit more weight than the other. All right? So how far ahead you plan is often, or how far ahead you think, is often related to intuition or sensing. People with an intuition preference tend to think farther ahead. Right? What's coming in the future? What might be? Where are we going down the road? People with a sensing preference tend to plan for what's going on in the immediate future. What's happening now? If you don't fix it today, the philosophy there is you'll never get to the future. The intuition preference is if I don't plan for the future, right, then I'm never going to get there. Both are valid, just different ways of looking at the problems. Okay? Now, it turns out, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, change and conflict are going to occur. But this occurs in any workplace. And one of the things that happens is when things become more stressful, you retreat to your strengths. The things that are your natural preferences become even more important when you become stressed. So what does that mean? When it comes to talking it out when things are stressful, the person with the extroversion preference says, with just a few more words, we can clear this up. And the introversion preference says, if I hear one more word, I'm going to go crazy. Right? You retreat to your strengths. All right, next one. Taking it personal. So it turns out that people with a thinking preference, with all that constructive criticism, tend to not take things very personal. Side note, if you question their personal competence, i.e. that it is a personal attack, they will take it personally. But if it's about their project, right, it's not, in general, they're going to take it as constructive criticism. But to the person with a feeling preference, everything is personal. It's their project. Of course it's personal when you comment on it. And so they can't help being personally invested. Now, that's not always a bad thing. One of the things that we assumed was in the world of sales was that people with a thinking preference would always be the better salespeople, right? They weren't going to take it personally. So they could keep going. But it turns out that people with a feeling preference were often just as good about being a salesperson, especially when they believed in the product. Why? They wouldn't take no. They believed in it. They believed that their product was right for the people they were talking to. And they would take the time to do that properly. And so therefore we made a mistake when we thought that. But it means that people with a feeling preference can't help but being personally invested. Now, there is a trick. If you're working with somebody who has a feeling preference and you need to give them some constructive criticism. How many people have heard of the sandwich technique? A couple people? Great. The sandwich technique looks a little bit like this. You need to give them some constructive feedback. You walk up and you go, Jill, I love the work you do here. It's fantastic. It's great. You're doing a great job. There's this little thing I could use some help with, right? We need you to be a little bit more proactive with your schedules and making sure that everyone else is seeing the schedule that you're doing. Could you send that out earlier in the week, the constructive criticism? Follow up with with more positive. By the way, that work you did last week on that project was amazing. That customer loved it. Great job. So the sandwich is the bread, good. The meat, the constructive criticism, and then bread, more good. You started with what they loved, the good, the positive, and you ended with what they cared about, the good or the positive. So that makes that stuff in the middle much easier to swallow. Now, flip side, if you were to walk up, if you have some constructive criticism to give, and you walk up to someone with a thinking preference, and you start with, Norman, that work you're doing is amazing. I want you to tell you it's really great. I'm so thrilled with all the work you're doing here. What is he waiting for?
The bad news.
Yeah, but, right? Wait a minute, right? As a matter of fact, you would have been much better off starting with the constructive criticism. So then when you later got to and by the way, Norman, the work you did on that contract last week, that was amazing. Now it's very believable to Norman. Because you started with the bad news. So if there was bad news about last week, that's not fake. You would have told me, clearly.
So it's like You give the bad news first.
Yes. Yeah, for people with victim preference, because otherwise they're waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, the good part just goes in.
Went over your head.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Bad part is the part I have to direct.
Yeah.
Politically correct, you know.
Plus they discount.
What are you really here for?
Right.
If I meet you for the first time or work with you a little bit, unless you're wearing this enough of these letters on you, how am I going to do that?
That is a great question, and I'm going to tell you the super secret answer that nobody tells you. Ask them. Ask them what they want. Right? You know, I mean, the reality is that even if they don't know all this system, all this other stuff, a lot of times they might know, hey, I'm about to talk to you about my product. Which would you rather hear? Would you rather hear what doesn't work about the product or where it doesn't work, or would you rather hear where it's great? A lot of times people will tell you right off the bat, what they prefer. Oh no, I would much prefer that you do it this way. Right? Or another option is just that you, it's for free, go and take it online. Right? Have them figure it out for themselves. But ask them. You know, oh, do you know your type indicator? Oh, okay, great. If you don't, go take it online. But the easy one is just to simply ask people what they want, so that you don't have to worry about the entire, forget the system. Just understand that people are different and they may have a different preference, and just ask them what their preference is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it seems like my whole life has been studying this stuff, trying to figure out what I want to do. But it's like getting the download, the understanding on the fly.
So let me tell you something, a little secret. I've been doing this for years. Guess how easy it is for me to remember it when I'm in the middle of an emotional discussion with my significant other? Great, right? No, please. When you're in the moment, again, it's not, I mean, it's great as intellectual exercise, right? Where this really begins to help you is the, okay, great, I had a difficult time that time. Honey, I'm sorry, I should have started with positive first, right? Coming back and maybe going the okay, oops, right? It doesn't mean you'll always get it right or you remember it, but it does give you some tools to take advantage. To hopefully do it right when it does happen. Right? So maybe it's for a client, or maybe you're working with a customer, and you're having to deal with some trouble with the customer. Knowing this ahead of time might really save you a little time, especially if you gathered over time what's most important to them, right? The hard truth, or whether they really want to feel like it's supportive. Right? So there is a sandwich, and it starts with the bag. All right? So, now it turns out that surprises, when things become stressful and change begins to occur, can be very painful. You would? So, people with a judging preference dislike surprises. And I would like to call it the hit and run tactic. So, if you would, next slide. Here's why they hate surprises. They've spent a lot of work putting that plan together, and you just ran up with a surprise. So a good example, maybe you've got stuff planned for next week in your business or your personal life, and you've got it all planned out, and it's Thursday or Friday, and you just get a call, and there's a major change. A vendor's just changed up. You're going to have to work over the weekend. You're not going to be able to be done by the first of next week. And so what you do is you call up your business partner, or you call up your spouse, and you go, honey, spouse, I just want to let you know, that plan for the weekend, yeah, I'm going to have to work through Saturday. I probably won't be done until noon on Saturday. I've got all this work to get done. Look, I'm really busy right now. Let me call you back later and we'll talk about it. Okay, bye, click. Hit and run. So here's the chicken. Are they mad that the plan changed?
You don't know.
Yeah, probably. Now the question, if you stay on the phone, are they still mad? What are you going to do when you get off the phone? What are they going to go do? They get energy from planning. They're going to make a new plan.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that by the time you call them 3 hours later,
We've got a new plan.
yeah. All right, here's what we're going to do. We can leave on Saturday. I changed, called the reservation. We'll stay out late on Monday, blah, blah, blah. Right? They've got a new plan. Right? So if you want to stay on the phone with them, you're only asking for your own pain and suffering. Now, if you decide you want to stay on the phone, your only task on the phone at that point should be to work on making the new plan. Right? For example, if you know they maybe have an extroverted preference, they need to talk it out. And so therefore, you're on the phone to talk about the new plan. So let's put together the new plan. Don't spend time on all the other stuff. Make the new plan. That's where they're going to get energy.
I don't know about business, but you've done wonders for my marriage.
the next one. So now, indecision, as things get, there's conflict, there's change, indecision can become a real part of the process, right? Oh, I don't know where to go. What are we going to go do? And if you go to the next one, people with a preceding preference are going to want to keep the options open and gather more information, which can be very frustrating if you need a decision now, especially if you have some other things that have to be decided. So people with a preceding preference have this need to keep the options open, and it's easier for them to know what they don't want. So the tactic there is what I like to call the let's do this tactic. I'll give you the lunch example, the classic example, where do you want to go for lunch? I don't know where you want to go. You've asked them what they do want. They don't know what they do want. They know what they don't want. So if you say, would you rather go to Chili's or Olive Garden? Oh, I can't stand Olive Garden. Or I had Olive Garden yesterday, I don't want to go to Olive Garden. They were able to tell you quickly what they don't want. So now, does that mean if they said they didn't want Olive Garden, does that mean Chili's is okay?
No.
It might, but they know what they don't want. So Chili's, ironically, at that point is actually okay. You know they don't want Olive Garden, but the Chili's will be fine because they know what they don't want. If they didn't want Chili's, they would have told you. So Chili's is actually okay. And the way this plays out in a business perspective is the let's try this. So they have a desire to keep things open. So hey, I know we can try this for now, right? And if we need to change it later, we will. Notice what that allows. It allows them to be flexible, and you've now just provided a specific option. If they hate that option, guess what they'll do? They know what they don't want, so they'll tell you. Right? If it's not going to work, they'll tell you. But you may not always get a strong positive answer, and that's okay. Notice one of the things I did earlier in this speech when I was talking about where to mark your numbers. It's okay to change it later. I wanted all those people in the audience here who have a preceding preference, like me, to make a choice to get started. Because it helps going through this process to have an understanding of at least be trying out a specific, okay, I'm trying out thinking or I'm trying out feeling. It works. So I told you, go ahead and mark something down now and you're welcome to change it later. Let's try this. All right. So, losing track of the details. If you would, it turns out that people with a sensing preference may focus on the details and may instead lose the big picture. I'm sure we've all maybe been in a business circumstance where somebody lost the big picture because they were so focused on the details. And the flip side can be true. A person with intuition focus may be so focused on the big picture that they may lose track of important details. So this is, our brain tends to retreat to whatever it does best. Right? Now, applying this in real life, kind of like back to your point, right? Is that it turns out that often, next one. Yeah, often just having an awareness of these differences, like we've talked about now, you're now aware of differences you weren't aware of before. You can't unlearn it. Aha! Right? I win. Well, and my goal of helping you understand that people are different, right? And that people react in different ways. Again, if you take only that away, that people are different and there's reasons to check to make sure if they want things differently than you, then we've had an amazing success in this presentation. But often knowing this provides a language to depersonalize the issues. I have a wonderful couple that's a friend in Miami, and they have guests down, and the wife has a very strong extroversion preference and loves having people hosting over the party. The husband has a strong introversion preference, and while he loves his friends coming over, he also happens to like to cook, so he'll go retreat into the kitchen and spend time cooking because he can get his private time. And when he gets late in the evening, he might even say, hey, you know what, I just need some time to recuperate. But we all know his type. It gave us a language for us to know that he's not going to go take a nap because he hates us, right? But it's because he has his own needs for his own energy. And it depersonalizes some of the issues. Good? But in the workplace, how does this play out? Next. One of the ones that's tricky is that all personality types want updates. They all want them. They want to keep abreast of what's going on. They want to know what's happening. They like communication. The question is, what kind of communication? What kind of communication do you think people with an introversion preference prefer in the workplace? Email. I'll give you another one that certain people in introversion preference often find they love. Texting. Exactly. One of the best inventions ever for people with introversion preference, right? Because it gives them that time to think about the response before having to send it. It's asynchronous. Now, extroversion. What kind of communication do you think they prefer? In person or face-to-face. Or, at worst, a phone call. Right? Remember what I mentioned earlier? I do a lot of video conferencing. One of my business partners in Boston. So, he and I work together frequently via video conference. It's as close as I can get to face-to-face. Because that helps me work better with him. Same kind of thing. So the important thing is not should you communicate, right? The answer is yeah, exactly. The answer is yes. The question is how should you communicate? And that can be true of your business partners, your spouse. That tip, by the way, works in relationships. Often if you need your spouse to consider something, maybe they have an introverted preference, letting them communicate with you via writing is often easier. To write to you back, oh, hey, here's this thing that's bothering me. Take some time, think about it, and come back to me. Right? You've given them that time to go consider it on their own. So, personality in your job. All types can do a job. They've actually done a ton of research. They've proven it. All personality types can succeed at all jobs. Now, that doesn't mean they succeed in the same ratio. Right? For example, if you think of the classic legal profession, the lawyer, most lawyers tend to have a strong thinking preference. Logic, structure, mentally the numbers, how does it all fit together, right? But someone almost cold and impersonal. However, if you're a lawyer with a feeling preference, that you care about people and that's your focus, what kind of law are you likely to do? Well, maybe, but family law, right? Something you care about, environmental law, pro bono, only in cases you care about, where you know the person. It depends upon, each person has their own preferences. I'll give you another example. People with an extroversion, lawyers with an extroversion preference, tend to love the courtroom. Especially if they have a perceiving preference, they like that deadline, they like that thrill of the face-to-face interaction. If you have an introversion preference as a lawyer, what kind of law might you prefer?
Civil.
Corporate? Or what do you say?
Researching.
Researching, right? Real estate law, right? So again, you may find a career, but it's about finding your niche, doing the job in a way that fits your strengths, rather than just because that's the way everyone else does it. That's the point of this. So one of the greatest sources of stress in any job isn't the work you do, but the people you do it with. Your coworkers, your bosses, your customers, your clients, right? As an entrepreneur, sometimes my greatest source of stress is my customers, right? Drive me crazy, right? So this is who is that. So when it comes to that, don't hide your preferences. Let them know. Right? If you know that you prefer a judging preference and you prefer to have a schedule, let your coworkers and your bosses know that you prefer a schedule and to let you know about changes as early as possible. Don't delay. Please let me know early so I can incorporate them into the plan. Share your preferences because that's the only way you're going to be able to really construct your job in a way that works best for you. Now, a couple of interesting places how this plays out. For school, one of the things that happens in school, if you would, is they did a bunch of research, and they know that succeeding, getting good grades via homework is very correlated with a perceiving and judging scale. I.e., next slide, think about it. This approach here tends to do a better job of getting the homework in on time. Right? Next slide. But testing, as in taking tests on paper, is very correlated with sensing and intuition. So therefore, next slide, think of it this way. Tests are often asking very abstract question. Where does this fact fit into the overall structure? So people with an intuition preference tend to naturally do well at testing. Next slide. So this is what grades look like. Now, an individual person might not exactly fit on this particular curve, but these are the trends. So what that means is that people with next slide, people with an S and the J together. How many people have S and J together? They tend, if they're getting good grades, it's probably because they're doing the homework. Probably. Next one. N and P together. How many people have N and P together? N and P tend to get good grades if they're getting good grades because they're able to test very well. Right? Homework, but I can test well. People with N and J, how many people have N and J together? Great. They tend to do well because they do both the homework and the testing. They're most likely to be your valedictorians. Right? And S and P together, how many people have S and P together? Right? Those types tend to be incredibly frustrated by the entire school process. The traditional school is not well designed. Right? This is traditional school, right? Is not well designed for that particular combination, and they're very frustrated by it. You would? Right? So, so these are some trends. This may affect your kids, right? Or may represent some of these things. But this is one of the things that we discovered is that we've been talking about these things, these letters, independently. I'm going to give you a secret now. That's the weakest way to look at them. Because they affect each other. So the real power in looking at these personality type codes is actually how they fit together and the unique combination. Just like it's the unique combination that is you. So when we start to fit them together, the combinations become much more powerful and much more clear in their impact on you and your work. So let me give you a more specific one. Next. How do they combine together in the world of business? So one of the things that we know, next slide, is that traditional business, corporate America, is very focused at the upper levels on a T and J approach. How many people have T and J together? This tends to be how upper level Fortune 100, Fortune 1000 corporate America looks at it. And 80% of all upper level management in corporate America has this TJ combination. We'll get to this diagram a little bit in just a moment, but we call it the execute function. All about driving schedules to the numbers. Think about traditional corporate America. Drive schedule to the numbers. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Less focus on the people, more focus on the numbers. Boom, 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 go. Now, next slide. Turns out, entrepreneurship has a fair amount of correlation with N and P together, especially ENTP. We call this the invent, right? Their brains are compelled to come up with new ideas and try to go do something with them. So they end up in entrepreneurship more often. Now, it turns out, statistically, in entrepreneurship, success is much more varied. This is not the formula for success in entrepreneurship. That's just a recipe for being driven to entrepreneurship. Some of us come to entrepreneurship from other roads. That's okay. Success in entrepreneurship is about finding your own way to succeed with your type in the process. If you would? So, quick one. If you're doing a proposal or a pitch for your business to somebody, and you know that person is an executive at a Fortune 100 company, and they have a TJ preference, what should you do in your proposal, in your PowerPoint, or how you're doing your pitch? What should you do? Numbers?
Milestones.
Facts? What was that?
Milestones.
Milestones. Now, we just described a little bit the classic corporate PowerPoint, right? Sales pitch. There's a reason why that's done that way. Now, let's say you're talking with a small or medium business, with a guy who founded his own business. He's created it from scratch, brought it up, right? Very high energy, dynamic. He has that N and P together, or she, and you're doing a pitch to them. What would you might do differently for that pitch? Possibilities. Oh, great one. Yeah, talk about possibilities. What else? Something that might work. What was that? Their experiences. Talk about what their ideas. Because it turns out that with this combination, in some ways you can almost walk in with the idea for what you want to go do and say, I got a PowerPoint.
Past experiences.
Right? Past experiences. Right? But
Benefits.
What? Benefits?
Benefits.
Right, especially if you have future thinking and being open to possibilities, right? It's the how might we alter and customize the benefits for you? We're being flexible. We're coming up with new ideas. So that this dialogue with them may actually be much more important than the PowerPoint. You might even just walk in and throw the PowerPoint off the side. Yeah?
Transformational, change the world.
Oh, absolutely. Huge, right? Could be very, very valuable. Now, quick question. How many times when you're talking to a business is there more than one person in the room? Now what do you do, right? Oops. So you got two people. You have the founder and you have the CFO in the room, right? So pretty good guess. Here's your founder with all the ideas, and here's your CFO. By the way, Walt and Roy Disney, just in case you're curious, right?
A lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Numbers got to be good.
So here's what I do. I bring two presentations. Or at least, here's the deck with all the numbers and the PowerPoints. And I might slide it across the room to this person. And hey, if you take a look at this, and then I'm talking numbers to this person. Right? Now I have a question. It's like speaking languages. If you're going into a presentation, and one of the executives only speaks Spanish, and one of these executives only speaks English, is it okay to speak English to the English executive and Spanish to the Spanish executive? To the Hispanic executive? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. It's okay. They know that, right? Right? You're communicating the language they care about. So it works the same way whenever you're doing a pitch. People know the language. I have a question. Does that founder know his CFO loves numbers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Does that CFO know that his founder loves to talk new ideas?
Yeah.
So when you walk in that presentation and you slide across that deck with all the numbers to the numbers person, are they thrilled?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the founder thrilled that you gave the numbers to the numbers person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And the reverse is true, right? This isn't. There's no secret. Just ask them. Which would you prefer? Who would like the numbers? Great. And you can just literally just go right in and ask people. All right. So again, structure, clear decisions, numbers, metrics, ideas, options, lots of change exploring. All right, keep going. Now, as I mentioned, these combine into very powerful patterns of behavior. If you would. So we call these go-to behaviors, and these also can be looked at as the brain functions. When we're doing all the brain research, this is where the power really came through, and combining these. If you would. So it turns out each of us have a go-to behavior. There's a variety of behaviors, and each one of those is a go-to, and that one is for you, natural. It's easy. You've probably been doing it a lot since you were a little kid. Just kind of like that left or right-handed. You've been learning to write for a long time with your dominant hand. It's quick, it's easy. It's the same way with your go-to behavior. You have a set of behaviors that works fast, it works well, you do it all the time, it works naturally. And that behavior is probably so good that to you it's obvious, and other people are sometimes mystified at how you can do that. And furthermore, that primary behavior is so good that guess what happens? Whenever something comes towards you, a project comes up, you start with your primary behavior. That's what works best. Of course I'm going to do that. And then as you use other behaviors that you have access to, it might start to cause you more stress because they're less developed. Now, these are based upon Carl Jung's work in psychological type, and it is what the Myers-Briggs type indicator is actually based on. The whole point of getting those 4-letter codes was an attempt to help people understand these 8 boxes. So, if you will. So, the first 4 are, notice the word P, are about how you perceive information, and the second 4 are how you just make decisions. Next box. So let's talk about that briefly. This now box. This is the combination of S and P, and it's about, this is the behavior of how you gather information to the present and immediate needs. You explore what is currently available. That's now. Stabilize is a look to the past. Right? I'm going to gather information from what we did in the past. What worked historically. Invent, I'm going to gather information from new and different ideas. And finally, connect, I'm going to see how things connect to the future. By the way, for Jungian psychology, this is it. This is the 4 ways in which your brain gathers information. Now, the past, the future, and what's new. That's it. Next, how your brain makes decisions. These are the 4 go-to behaviors for that. You can analyze things, decide on how it's logically correct or incorrect, execute, decide based upon measurable goals to drive towards an objective, consideration, Decide based upon people's needs and empathize with others. And lastly, value. Decide based upon if it's ethically right or wrong. And this is it. There's 4 ways in which you come to a decision. Now, it turns out everybody uses all 8 of these, just not in the same amount. Right? You have one of them that's really strong, that you use very, very well, and is natural and easy for you. You have a second one that you use to support it, and really all other behaviors after that primarily exist to serve your dominant preferred behavior. Next slide. So here's what they look like, but it turns out, next slide, that they come in 2 forms. Extroverted or introverted. Some of them are extroverted, and by that I mean these behaviors are easy to see in the outside world. When you're talking with someone else and you're interacting with them, you're using one of these extroverted behaviors. These on the bottom are what we call introverted behaviors. So again, you have all 4 introverted behaviors, but when you're spending time by yourself writing or working on a project, you're most likelihood accessing one of those go-to behaviors. That's what your brain is doing in that EEG brain scan. It's accessing those specific behaviors. All right? Now, it turns out that how these are experienced in the outside world by those of us is if you have E or P together. How many people have E and P together? Right? Most people experience you as someone who likes to dynamically explore things. Right? Explore ideas or explore what's there. Next combination. How many people have I and J together? Great. Most people experience you as someone who wants to carefully understand things. Carefully understand how it fits into the past and what we did before, or carefully understand how it fits into the future. Next. How many people have E and J together? All right. Most people experience you as someone who loves to organize and direct. Right? Organize and direct towards measurable goals, and organize and direct towards people's needs. Right? They see you, experience you as that kind of person. Next. Last one. How many people have I and P together? Okay. Most people experience you as someone who likes to refine for perfection. Refine for logical perfection, right? Or refine for ethical perfection. All right. So, but these really combine together. Each individual 4-letter code combines together to make a combination. So if you would, we call these superpowers, and let's go through the 4 preceding ones first. Next slide. How many people have ESFP or ESTP as their 4-letter combination? Anybody? Okay, a few? Great. For you, this now box is your dominant function. That's it. And so that means that you are very good at looking to the present and immediate needs, explore what is currently available, and the strength when anybody is using this box, if you will, this behavior, is a focus on today, but the weakness is potentially ignoring the long term. Quick fun fact for those of you who are ESFP or ESTP. Fun fact, often people, their brain is so good with now that they're naturally good at sports. Not that they're maybe an athlete, right? But they're just more aware of the world around them, and so physical activity is easy. And very good at reading body language. Next. So this is what it might look like. Anybody have ESTP? In combination ESFP?
ESPN.
Right? ESPN? This is what it might look like. So this is, I'm going to go through each one of these for all the types. But so for ESTP, this is what's most important. Right? Focusing on today. And here, this is what people see. Do people see this portion of them? No, not very much. Right? This is their need when they're by themselves to really make sure that what they're doing logically fits together. And so they might tap into a little bit of execute and a little bit of consideration. I like to refer to consideration as like diplomacy. Right? They tap into those as necessary to make things happen today. This type is probably one of the best troubleshooters. Right? Send things have already gone to hell in a handbasket. Send one of these people in, dive in there because they're going to love it. Thrilled. They can jump right in there, experience what's going on, and make a difference. Next. Now, from the outside, above the line, go back and forth between these two. Can people tell the difference between these two types? No, probably not. because what's different is on the inside. So most psychological tests might even fail to differentiate properly between these two.
Because of your values.
Right, right. So therefore, if you have ESTP and ESFP, you might often find that those types feel a strong degree of, I feel kind of like I'm kind of thinking and kind of feeling. Because they are. They access both thinking and both feeling types. They access both. All right, next. All right, how many people have INTJ or INFJ? Right? For those people, it's the connect box. Again, everybody has this one. When you're using the connect box, this is like the opposite of now. You look to how things connect in the future, and you predict possible outcomes. So the strength is considering the big picture, and the weakness is over-considering, spending too much time gathering information. So when this is a superpower, we call it super comprehension, it's almost like their brain is quickly able to come together with complete answers and accurate predictions. Go to the next slide. So I like to refer to this as the iceberg phenomenon. The brain is very good at seeing how things connect together when you use this box. So therefore, it's about, oh, I see this problem out there. I can see it ahead of everybody else. And if you can imagine a big iceberg here, right here, with just the top of the iceberg above the line, they can see that iceberg. They see how it all fits together. And they point out to their coworkers, iceberg! Right? And their coworkers look out, and what do they see? Just that part up there. And they go, great, no problem. We'll turn the company, we'll get an angle so we avoid the iceberg. So they turn it just a tiny bit to avoid the top. Meanwhile, this part down here is introverted, which means it's harder to find the words to properly describe it to other people. You can see the implication clearly, but finding the right words to describe it and explain it may sometimes be tough. And so what happens here is that they later go back and they say, I told everyone iceberg. And everyone's like, yeah, we see it. We got it, no big deal. It's like, no, the whole thing is connected to the stuff. Right? And so this is a challenge with all of the introverted functions below the line, is that they're sometimes a little bit harder for us to use words to describe them. They're often better off when writing, or doing diagrams, or doing models, CAD drawings. Right? Those are things that work well in an introverted way. INFJ. Now, here's the thing. If you look at these two types here, go back one. Most people, when they experience INTJ, they see this. Is that the most important part of who they are? No, it's that. But they see this. Same thing, next slide. People experience this one. So people a lot of times see these two types and think they're very, very different people. But on the inside, they're more alike. Because of how they think about the world, how they approach things. All right? How many people have ISTJ or ISFJ? Great. So that we call that superpower total recall. But whenever you use the stabilize function, you're looking to the past and the traditions and what worked. You're focusing on consistency. So the strength here is repeatable performance, doing the same thing over and over again. The weakness is, well, making changes, right? Now, when we call this a superpower total recall, what we mean is not that you remember everything, but instead, the parts that your brain considers important, it remembers everything about that. A good example of that is this is the, if you go one more, ISTJ is the stereotypical movie accountant. Right? Kind of quiet, kind of introverted. You see this kind of focus on numbers, and they're very focused on keeping things the same. Right? Numbers. And that kind of brain is probably actually really good at remembering everything about those spreadsheets. That number, they can look at those numbers and look at the numbers from 5 years ago and know that that number is one bit off from, one decimal place off from the 30 other times they've seen that thing. In the case of an airplane inspector, they see the plane maybe 5 times when they came into the Orlando airport. And they may notice on the 5th time that it's almost like their brain can lay a mental overlay over that plane and see that that one bolt is, the nut is turned 50 degrees to the left. Because that's what they're focused on recalling. And they really experience that in like a full fidelity, right? They experience everything about whatever it is their brain really considers important. Right? Oh, wow. Oh. And we're scrolling fast. All right, and a couple more down. One more. Here we go. Keep going. We got about 4 more to go. 4, 5, 6. I'm abstract, so there you go. Keep going. Stabilize. Okay, 2 more. And 1 more. All right, there we go. All right. Invent and create a storm. All right, how many people have ENFP or ENTP as a preference? Okay. So this is the invent box. Anytime anyone uses the invent box, it's about looking to the new and different ideas, exploring many possibilities. Whenever you're in a meeting and you're brainstorming, you're probably tapping into the invent box. That's what you're doing. So the strength is, of course, exploring new ideas. The weakness is, well, being consistent. People with a large invent box, the dominant function, may try to drive to work a different way every day. Right? It's about finding new ideas, new ways. So one of the fun things, if you go to the next slide, is that this, by the way, is a brain scan in flow. How many people have heard of the concept of flow? Heard of it neurologically? Have you ever heard of like that being in the zone?
Yeah.
Right? This idea that you lose track of all time. You're in doing whatever task it is that you do really well, and it's just clicking, right? It's like your brain's firing all the cylinders. You're awake, you're active, but you're also calm. You're like, you just got it. This is a brain in flow. The entire brain, if you remember the other scans, we're showing certain parts working. The entire brain is actually in sync working together. All pieces, all firing together. Now, which activities a brain goes into flow might be somewhat different based upon what combination they are. But there's a slight challenge for those who are ENFP or ENTP. Their brain does this. One more. It's actually called asynchronous thinking. And what this is what you're asking in the math problem, is they're also thinking about that Chicago is where they last had some really great caramel apples. And caramel's really great, and their grandmother had a great apple recipe for caramel. And their grandmother's old Studebaker was fantastic. Didn't they love that car? Their brain is literally thinking multiple things at multiple times. So, to a certain extent, this is what brainstorming looks like. Right? And now, people that your natural preference, that's your strength, it goes all out. And your brain is constantly flooded with new ideas, no matter what anybody else is talking about. It's okay, I happen to have this strength, so I'm okay with the fact that people would share this with me while I'm doing my presentation or thinking other thoughts. I know it's okay. All right. So for ENTP, here's what they do. Invent is what compels them. This is why I think this type is often an entrepreneur. They're driven. Their brain forces them to go off and do new stuff. So of course they're going to end up with more entrepreneurs frequently. Now, however, notice how large this stabilized box is. How good are they about creating a consistent environment for their customers?
Or their employees.
Or their employees, right? How good are they about creating that consistent environment? Oh, maybe not so good, right? So it's not to say that they're maybe the best entrepreneurs, but their brain drives them to be entrepreneurs. But each of their brain now attempts to pull in, drive to measure objectives, analyze for logic, consider be diplomatic. It uses all of these in its effort to create new ideas. So the brain taps into those other functions to do that. Next. Same thing with ENFP. All right? Next. All right, so now let's talk about the 4 judging functions and their superpowers. All right, next. So, analyze. How many people have INTP or ISTP as your combination? A few? Great. Great. All right. So, this is the function that's about decide based upon logically correct or incorrect. That's what it does. And it's about evaluating the best, most efficient approach. And the strength is being logically correct, and the weakness, trying to get it perfect. Right? Keep refining that logical perfection. Keep working at it. Keep working at it. So, this is the part of the brain that truly does if-then logic. And so for those where this is the dominant part of their experience, they're really frustrated because the rest of us don't really use logic. Not in the way they do. Not at the same level. Next. So, this is ISTP. And I often like to describe this as a great example of the architect. Right? If you want to think of the next slide, if you go to the next slide, really, especially. This is the stereotypical movie absent-minded professor. Coming up with new ideas, right? But really very much on the inside. Focusing on how does it all fit together in your head. They're working on how it logically fits together. And so if you were to talk to someone like this, who is maybe a building architect, and they spent time beautifully working out all of the things about how this building fits together, and where the pipes are, and the stairwells, and the bathrooms, and the sinks, and the electricity, and how it all fits together, and it's beautiful in their mind. And you come up to them and you say, hey, could you describe that in maybe a paragraph or less? Words fail. Right? These interior functions, that's the problem they always have. Is that words often just fail to capture the entirety of what it is. All right. How many people have ESFJ or ENFJ? Combination. All right, a few people? Great. So we like to call this consideration, and this is the function you use when you're deciding based upon people's needs, when you're empathizing with others. So, and the strength is really that connecting with others, and the weakness is sometimes being lost in others' needs. Now, the thing is that their brain is so good at this that to other people, it may almost be experienced like mind reading, because they're so focused on other people's needs. They get it. They understand it. And that understanding connected with others is really powerful for them. So if you would. So here you go. ESFJ. Go to the next one. ENFJ, Nicole. So here you can see, this is what's most important. And they might use, okay, we're going to drive to some measures, or we're going to find new ideas, or we're going to focus on what's happened today, or we're going to worry about how the big picture all fits together. All of those work to serve this need to help other people's needs. So these are that's how they fit together. Next. All right, nearly the opposite. We call it the execute function. How many people have ENTJ or ESTJ? Great. So this is all about deciding based upon measurable goals and driving towards objectives. The strength is pushing projects forward. The weakness is, well, lack of accuracy. If you've ever heard of the military concept of it's better to make a decision than have no decision at all, that's function talking. Right? It's better to have something you're moving towards clearly, know where you're headed, even if it's the wrong thing to be standing there doing nothing. So this function is super efficient. Their brain literally thrives on getting things done. People with this function are often, as their dominant function, are often accused of being workaholics. That's because the rest of us go do something else to relieve stress. Their brain relieves stress by getting things done. So they will often come into work early or go stay at work late so they can get things done, because in meetings all day they weren't getting anything done. Right? And so they're thrilled to be able to go get things done, and that actually reduces their stress, is getting things done. That efficiently. They also, on a side note, often need the least amount of sleep of any of us. Next. So here's what it looks like, right? So they might use some diplomacy. They might use new ideas. They might use some of the now. And then ESTJ is focused on look to the past, but it's all in service of getting things done. Get it done. Side note, I often like to joke that execute is the jerk function. Often people, when somebody's using this function, often other people see them as being a jerk, right? Because it's about, hey, you are not getting the things that need to be done. You've committed to these 5 things. They're not done. You need to get them done, right? This is the part of your brain that compels you to go tell them they're not done on their objectives. All right? And there you go. ENTJ again, same idea. Using those connecting things to the future. All right. So the somewhat opposite. How many people have ISFP or INFP? Great. So this is about, when you're using this function, it's about deciding based upon ethically right or wrong. And syncing with people's individual values. Note, this is not society's ethics. This is their own personal guidelines. So the strength they have is really this individual respect. They're very focused on individual values and needs. And so therefore, they're very aware often of other people's needs and values. The weakness can sometimes be too respectful. Oh, and we've got the wrong fun back there. Oops. All right, so here we go. This is the way this works for them, for selfless courage, is that this is the brain type that is often very good at letting things slide when somebody says something mean to them. But when somebody says something mean to someone they love or care about, watch out. Right? You know, it's sometimes referred to the Joan of Arc complex, or the mother bear problem. Right? You know, don't anger the bear. Right? All right. So let's see if we got. I think we actually have the one. Keep going. There. Okay, oh. And we're done. Yeah. Can we get back up just a little bit, please? It's going to take about 5 to 7, 8, and there you go. Perfect. So here, again, notice what's most important to them. Their values. Just out of curiosity, how well do you think this type loves corporate America? No. Exactly.
Or government.
It's about respect and individual values. And so most people don't ever see this part of who they are, right? All that, they see them like dealing with practical reality. This is what's got to get done. They don't see this part that's really important to them, this value part. All right? Next, and there we go. So now, we go one more. So the reality is everyone behaves in a particular pattern. And if we go back one, it's in a particular order for a reason. Because this is actually the way most problems are solved. You look at what's there now. Right? Then you look to what's happened in the past. Then you come up with some new ideas. You see how it connects forward to the future, those new ideas. Then you make sure it's logically correct. You set some goals. Right? You make sure that it's going to fit the people. And then you make sure it fits with your values. And then you go on to the project. So the reality is if you're doing a really good project, do you want all of those in your project? Yeah, probably. Right? However, is any one person going to be good at all of them? No. All right, next slide. So keep going. One more. So here's the symbols for the superpowers, each of the different ones. But go to the next slide. But your project may only have this on it. Okay? Or maybe you figure out these are the ones you need. Right? These are the behaviors you need, and so those are the only ones you need. But being conscious of your own strengths, the strengths of your team, and which ones you have and which ones you don't, might be very valuable in helping you make sure that even though using that offhand may be a little stressful and take more time, it may be worth it because it's not a strength on your team to force your team to stop and go through that particular function. If you would. Because this may be what your team looks like, or hopefully not, this next one, this may be what your team looks like. Right? Right? Hopefully that should be scary. Now, it turns out that if you have a team, they're all very much the same type, they make decisions typically very quickly and easily. Because they all think about things very, very similar ways. They may have different backgrounds, but the way they approach it will be similar. Now, if you have a great deal of diversity on a team, will it always be easy? No. In fact, it'll probably be hard. In fact, it'll probably take longer to come to conclusions about your project. But it's almost always going to be a better conclusion because you properly went through the different sides. All right? So again, if you want to, you can go out and go take those superpower quiz for free. So if you have your team, go out and take it. Learn the superpowers, and now you know what functions they are and how they're working. The report also shows the go-to behaviors, the prominent in the second one. Next. And this way, we've also designed the system as well, so that if you don't happen to like our style of superpowers or go-to behaviors, you like Gallup Strengths Finder, you can track that as well. How many people heard of Gallup Strengths Finder? Right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So our purpose of this system was to allow you to use whichever system works for you in your organization or your team. Use whatever one you like. Use this to track it and share it. All right? So again, that's out of getzytes.com when you go there for the Superpower Quiz Report. As I mentioned before, right now, while it's in beta, we're offering the at-work and the relationship report for $5. So you can pick that up for you or somebody in your team. And questions? I don't think the name. So it's actually started off the word site. Yeah, but we put a Z on it because that was available. Notice the fancy technique we use for that. Yes, brainstorm. Yes.
Have you ever heard of soul types?
Soul types? I don't know that I have. I'm not sure I've heard of that one. I know there's several out there that are faith-based. I know there's actually, I've got a couple of books that are people on taking the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and similar works through a faith-based process to look at that. And there's some interesting correlations between how people approach spirituality and their type.
Right.
As you might guess, someone who has a very, very large analyze logical box may approach their spirituality very differently than someone who has a very large values box. Yes?
I thought the questionnaire was very unique in that the questions very quickly, as opposed to most questionnaires I've done where it's A or opposite A, B or opposite B, very quickly the questions got almost completely not even related to each other.
Right.
Two choices. I thought that was very curious. Is
So
there a reason for that? Or
yeah. So one of the things that I'm very focused on is that it turns out in the modern world of the internet, patience is not exactly a strong suit.